Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to your new weekly tradition here on the weekends. I say weekends because sometimes we may need to do this on Sundays. We may end up replacing your NFL fix on Sundays until the season in and of itself starts. But before we get to that point, of course, we have what is the hottest sports podcast on the market today. At least I like to think so. We are the Sports Agents of Chaos, back again, the big three. We are here once again to talk the king sport in North America and probably like top 3, top 4 in the world. Football, the good old gridiron, American football. And of course, as always, joining me are two amazing guests of mine. But before we get to that, I would like to say, as well as being on my personal Twitter this week, we are live on YouTube for the first time. So, boys, third episode, we're live on YouTube. We're making strides. Just wait until we get our own intro and our own music. It's just gonna be just bangers out here. When will that be?
If we get our own theme song, I shot you the lyrics. That'd be great. That'd be awesome.
And so right to it. Of course, you all know me. I am Jurgen. That beautiful gentleman that just spoke is the man, the myth, the legend, the podfather of the podcast, the man who brought this all together in terms of when we originally started working with one another. Podfather Rick. Rick, how you doing?
Howdy. How's everyone doing? I am great. I had a very fun Saturday of running around doing a lot of different things. Bought myself a lovely camo golf bag at Dick's Sporting Goods for about $250, but worth it because my golf bag was destroyed the last time I went out. So I needed to get a new one. So figured get one that looks like that. It's beautiful. So I'm very, very excited, very happy to have made that purchase and happy to be joining y'all again. And happy that I didn't miss any memos on the coloring, although Justin's shirt makes me want lemonade for some reason, but I'm not quite sure.
When life gives you lemons, you got to make a nice shirt.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Very fair.
Forget watermelon sugar. Justin's going old school with the lemons, and of course, as introduced right there, the third of our triumvirate here, our guy Justin Zuckman Zucker. Brother, how you doing today? It's a beautiful day.
Doing well. Yes, it is.
I just gotta say, I prefer Zucktails. To Zuckman.
That's yours. The thing is, mine is Zuckman, yours is Zucktails. I cede that nickname to you.
Yeah, that's fine because there's a duck on the StreamYard, so I prefer that too. But yes, either one I think is good.
So. We're totally gonna edit Justin's lower third there at some point to just say Zucktails, and everyone's gonna forget what his actual name is. But we, of course, are back, and we are here to bring you the beautiful football news because, au contraire, Monfrey, if you thought all the big NFL deals were done last week when we talked to Sean Watson fellas, we talked to Devontae Adams, we thought everything was done. No. The NFL is saying, we want a piece of this offseason pie here. You think it's NBA and the NHL's time? No. We're still here. We are still here. So we are going to talk about the big trades that happened this past week. A former MVP, all-time quarterback for a franchise was dealt. One of the premier wide receivers in the game was unexpectedly dealt. We'll dive into that. And of course, still plenty of names out there. We're going to go there as well. But before that, we have our two beautiful weekly segments that we need to get to. And of course, just like last week, we're going to start it off this week as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick's review of the week. We're up in the ante here. So, Rick, I cede the floor to you. What are we reviewing this time?
Okay, so you guys know me. I like being topical. You know that this weekend is obviously the Oscars, but also as today was the Golden Raspberry Awards, the Razzies as they're known, for the worst movies of the year. Now, if I were to go through the Razzies that were this year, we probably didn't see any of those movies. And by the way, LeBron James won Worst Actor for Space Jam: A New Legacy, as deserved, by the way. Terrible movie. But I want to wind back the clock to 1997, gentlemen. Now, either one of you, if I were to tell you Sandra Bullock movie, what would you think? You'd think probably going to be a good movie, right?
I'd hope so.
The Blind Side was a very good movie, right? I personally like that. So if I were to tell you Willem Dafoe movie, what would you think?
I think that's a candidate for movie of the year.
I think so too. And if I were to tell you that the location of this movie was set on a lovely speedboat going towards the Isle of St. Martin in the Caribbean, you'd think, okay, I got a good possibility. I might watch this. But if I were to tell you that it was Jason Patric and not Keanu Reeves starring opposite Sandra Bullock, what would you tell me? Who is Jason Patric? I'm talking about Speed 2 Cruise Control, one of the worst movies of 1997, maybe the worst, if not for Kevin Costner's epic The Postman. This movie, guys, got a 4% on Rotten Tomatoes. That means 96% of the people who watched this movie did not like it. And crucially enough, Sandra Bullock was one of those people who did not like it. She said in an interview recently that she could not stand the movie. It's a cult following. She said those who like it, or maybe the 4 or 5 of them, great. But it literally is a slow boat crawling towards the end of the movie and the end of death, basically. That's all it is. It's Speed 1, amazing. Dennis Hopper, great villain, great story, good chemistry between Keanu and Sandra Bullock. This movie, terrible. So bad. So wooden dialogue. It's just replacing Speed, but on a speedboat. And the key is speedboat. It's not a speedboat. It's a slow cruise to St. Martin where they blow up an island. Like, great. But I can't get over the fact that this movie with Sandra Bullock, an Oscar winner, Willem Dafoe, a notable Oscar nominee, was horrible. Absolutely horrible. Do not go out of your way to watch this movie unless you want to go to the images and look at Willem Dafoe making the Nicolas Cage face in one scene, because he does that. It's that. And it's terrible. It is a horrible, horrible movie. Would not recommend. 0 out of 5. -5 stars, even if I could do that. That would be my goal, my idea. I regret ever watching this movie. I mean, I loved Speed, but Speed 2, never again. I would rather watch The Tortoise and the Hare in real life from the perspective of the tortoise. It could be an 8-hour film that I would enjoy a little bit more. So that's for me. That's my review of the week. Thank you all for attending my mind and my TED Talk. I really appreciate it.
I love it. I think Rick should have an Oscar vote after that. I really do.
Oh, I'm down for that. Absolutely. Belfast for the win.
I think we have goals on this show. I think we're going to set, short-term and long-term goals. I think one of our long-term goals, Justin, needs to be that at some point Rick gets in his possession an Oscar vote. It doesn't need to be every single year, just 1 year. Rick gets to have Oscar votes.
I will not rest till he has that Oscar. How about that?
I agree.
I was going to say,
or an Oscar.
The vote is great, but I want the actual Oscar. Like, that'd be awesome. That'd be.
Well, do you think Hollywood's really going to give it to us?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
We got to set standards.
I had a delusion once that I actually hosted the Oscars, because they were like, well, if we're not going to have anybody host, then why not have somebody who's not in the Academy host? And then I realized I'd be too much like Ricky Gervais and just yelling at everybody, and it'd be hilarious, but not really my thing. So, but yeah. I won't be all movies. I won't be all sports. I will be reviewing many different other things in my time, but this was a nice little topical detour from the sports world, because we're
I love it.
Yeah,
absolutely, and I love it. I think that needs to be the thing of the reviews. It's like you don't know what's going to get reviewed. Heck, for all we know, next week it could be a restaurant that Rick went to most recently that he tried for the first time.
I am your own personal in the living flesh stumbleupon.com. That's what I am. If you remember StumbleUpon, where you just click on it, it just goes to a random URL. That's what I'm going to be. That's what this review is going to be. So I'm fine with that. Absolutely.
I love it. I think it just makes it more dynamic, and that's what the show is all about. Speaking of dynamic, speaking of our weekly segments, we're not done, because we have this week, once again, bringing it back, the man who knows it off the dome, and if he needs to double check his info, he goes to Google Chrome. We have Justin's trivia this week.
Oh, man.
Right.
I taught you well, Jurgen. I taught you very well with how to write and how to rhyme.
I learned from the master himself.
Yes.
Justin, once again, like with Rick, the floor is yours, my man. You always bring it great with the trivia. We always have a fun time. I don't care if I get it wrong. I don't care if I can't get it. Like I just like working the brain, with whatever question you bring. So let's get it. Let's get to it this week.
All right. So we're going to go with wide receiver trivia this week. And there's going to be a combined 3 answers. We're going to give, I guess, everyone, because you had your 3 choices each. We're going to see if we can get all 3 within each one. So only name one at a time. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Nice to see you, pup. So without further ado.
It's okay.
Ratings just spiked.
So cute.
Thank you.
There have been 4 wide receivers since the 1970 NFL merger to win the NFL Triple Crown in receiving, which means they led the league in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. Cooper Kupp has done it most recently this past season.
Mm-hmm.
Can you name the other 3?
Okay. So I have
This is interesting, actually. This is a really, really interesting one.
So the first name that popped in my mind, I know he definitely led in receptions this year. Part of me thinks he may have also led it in yards. So this is going to be my first guess. I think this is a strong first guess to get us on track. Larry Fitzgerald.
No.
Dang.
Incorrect.
That's a guess that I would have gone with as well.
Because he had a really good season in his prime.
He did.
I'm pretty sure
he was
pretty sure he led the league.
You know what? He was
receptions or
also a very
yards, one of those.
consistent wide receiver. So I mean, that to me was a very good guess as well. I think one is obvious, and I think if well, Jurg, what do you think? Should I burn the obvious choice, or should I leave that one for later?
I think just burn the obvious one right now. Get the one we know out the way, and we can save our guesses for the next two guys.
Okay, so the obvious one to me is Jerry Rice.
In 1990, Jerry Rice did it. He led the league with 100 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 13 touchdowns.
Yeah, because I mean that whenever you think about wide receiver glory, you associate with Jerry Rice. I mean that to me was I think that to me was the easy one. I think that I might have burned one of the Jurgen's guesses honestly, because I think that was too easy. I almost want to say.
Right. I was. It was probably most obvious. I was definitely trying to go with a modern guy because I have to feel that another modern guy did this semi-recently. So that was part of the mindset. And now when we know Jerry Rice definitely did it. So we got Jerry Rice out the way. We got two more.
Mm-hmm.
And you each have two more guesses.
That's right. We do.
So the funny thing is that, of course, these guys are top receivers for that season that they did it. But I don't think we can just focus on top receivers all time, because I'm sure some people would immediately go to the big names. But Randy Moss would not be this. Not my guess, but Randy Moss would not be one of the guys on this list, because while Randy Moss had some really good touchdown seasons, he doesn't need a lot of receptions to get those touchdowns and yards. Like, what was that, Rick? I'm sure you remember this better than anyone. What was that one game he had his rookie season? He had 3 catches, 130 yards, and 2 or 3 touchdowns.
They were all touchdowns. Yeah, they were all touchdowns. So he didn't need to catch the ball a lot, but whenever he caught the ball, he was dangerous. Absolutely.
If I'm not mistaken, that was a Thanksgiving game against the Cowboys.
Yes, it was.
Bringing pain to Dallas, even retroactively.
I love it.
And none of us are Giants fans, so we're doing it anyways.
No. Jurgen, before you guess, I wanna ask Justin if this, and I don't want to give this away as a hint, but I do want to ask him this: when you say wide receivers, are you strictly meaning wide receivers, or do you also include tight ends as well?
I don't think there was ever a tight end that led the league in receptions, touchdowns, and passing yards.
Okay,
but I was speaking truly just wide receivers. That's all I have on my list.
Okay. That makes sense, because I think. Because I definitely get Rick's point, but I think it was more so recently when you think about it and honestly, a tight end might find their way on this list one day. That's the funny part, because you have some tight ends in this league that have that potential.
He almost did it last year. He almost led the league in passing yards.
Yeah,
reception yards.
Yeah, my second guess was going to lean towards that, because I feel like I know kind of where the area is, but since you said not tight end, it's not the guess I was going to make initially.
So I have my guess, and because I was racking my brain, like, okay, let's think of guys here. This guess might surprise people, but then you remember he was a baller, and of course he also had a This Is Sports Center commercial, so you already know he's up there. Led the league in with receptions, with yards and touchdowns, for a kind of under the radar franchise, even still to this point, despite a couple Super Bowl appearances for the team. And I think the reason why some people forget about this was because Jerry Rice played with Hall of Fame quarterbacks for a majority of his career. Essentially the entirety of his career.
Yeah.
This guy, though, not so much. Steve Smith, Sr. with the Carolina Panthers.
Oh,
great guess.
That's a good one.
Yes, in
because
2005. Yes, Steve Smith had 103 receptions, 1,563 yards, and 12 touchdowns.
That's a good one. That's a really good pick there, Jurg, because that wasn't that the year they went to the title game? Wasn't that the Jake Delhomme like Renaissance year or something like that? 05?
And that's the thing. Like, when you think about it with Steve Smith, that's why he was seen as so special. And a lot of people forget about him, because like I think a lot of fans now only think of the very end of his career, where he was still a good player at the end of Carolina and Baltimore. But at the very beginning of his career, he was like, as the Sports Center commercial said, his speed was incendiary, because he was just an absolute burner, and he was amazing with his hands. Like he's one of those guys where it's like when the Pro Bowl was actually entertaining, like with the catching drill, like him and Ocho Cinco, like when they would actually do that drill, that was entertaining, because like these guys, it just really showed how fundamentally outstanding they were. Like he was one of those guys who could literally do it all.
So that's awesome. So my next pick, like I said. So my thought, the reason why I asked you about tight ends, Justin, was I was thinking about not necessarily like Tony Gonzalez or Jimmy Graham, but I was thinking about like the tight ends of the '90s, like a Mark Chmura from Green Bay, or even a Shannon Sharp from Denver. But when you said it wasn't really tight ends, that got me to think about Shannon Sharp's teammates in the late '90s in Denver. And Ed McCaffrey was a great two receiver, but he was never going to lead the league, I think, in receptions or yards. So the number one guy in that Denver offense, though, I think was pretty significant. I'm gonna go with the Mile High Man himself, who didn't catch fire because of the sweets. Rod Smith.
Ooh, that's also a very good guess. No, that's not one of the receivers on my list, though.
That's a really good guess, though, Rick.
Yeah.
All right, one guess apiece. Does anyone got it in their bag of tricks?
So I'm torn between four. So let me think about it for a minute, because I've got a few names in my pocket that I'm thinking about, but I'm not 100%. So I'll eliminate two. I'll eliminate two of them. I'll do 50-50. And I'll tell you, Jurgen, if you have a guess, I'll tell you who I eliminated after you guess.
Mm-hmm. So for me, like, I'm kind of trying to be on the same path as you of like just thinking of names. So I think personally, I think I've eliminated in my mind any like legitimate receiver in the last like half decade or so. Because I just think to myself, so these are some of the names like recently, because there have been some really good wide receivers who have come semi-close. Michael Thomas, when he led it in receptions, I forget how close he was to the yards as well. Maybe he led or was close to that, but I definitely know I don't think he had the touchdowns. Julio Jones and Antonio Brown, while amazing, I think they only ever led in one of those categories at most. I don't think they were ever close to twice. And Calvin Johnson was like the next name, and I'm like, Megatron had to, because he almost had a 2,000-yard receiving season. But then you remember in like his most dominant 3-year stretch with the Lions, there was a random season where he had like those high yards, but he only had like 5 touchdowns. So I've just been eliminating guys, and I've kind of got to a point here, Rick, where I don't think I can name any legitimate receiver that's come on in the last like half decade or even decade. So I'm trying to rack my brain around like the 2000s and the 90s now. Mainly the early 2000s.
Well, there is one name that I think you haven't mentioned who could have been a good option, but I feel like either yards or touchdowns he missed on. That's Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison had a lot of great years of receptions, but I feel like touchdowns maybe he didn't get as many, because he also had Reggie Wayne in Indy too with Peyton Manning, so that might have been, and even the tight end race too. So he's not my guess, but he's another guy of the, like you said, the half decade that I think.
Yeah, he'd be up there. He'd be one of those guys, because like you said, he led the league. He set the record for receptions, and I also forget he definitely missed out on either the touchdowns or the yards. I do forget which one, but yeah, it's another one of those close ones. Reggie Wayne. I mean, I know Reggie Wayne never led in any of those categories, but like just a physical freak, like coming out.
You're talking about a great number 2 wide receiver there, Reggie Wayne. Absolutely, Reggie Wayne and Ike Hilliard to me are the 2 best number 2 wide receivers of the '90s that aren't named Chris Carter, because obviously Randy Moss was number 1, and Chris Carter was amazing. But yeah. So, all right, let me tell you who I eliminated. First. And Justin, if you want to give a hint, we can do that. But I eliminated Steve Largent, because those Seattle offenses in the 80s weren't really high power, but he always found a way to the ball. And I'm eliminating, I think he's before the merger, maybe not, but I'm eliminating Biletnikoff, because I feel like it was such a different game back then when he was playing. But he's arguably the best wide receiver of the 70s, 80s that, people would remember, because he's got all those awards in that him too. But I eliminate him because I feel Jurgen like this is the 90s guy. I feel like it's a 90s guy.
I'm starting to think the same. I'm starting to feel the same. This is testing my brain power. That's the problem. It's testing my brain power.
Do you have a guess on you, Jurgen?
Not necessarily. Like I'm trying to rack my head around.
I have 2, and they're from the same team. I'm going to burn the one that I'm least confident in, because if it's the other one, I'll be surprised, but I feel like these 2 guys were, I'm going to go with Green Bay, and I'm going to say Antonio Freeman.
No, it is not Antonio Freeman.
Man.
But here's the thing, Rick. You lobbed it up for me, because I think we found our answer with what we were doing. Because I think we got our answer here, because now this is also just because of me, because because randomly my brain works in mysterious ways. I think all three of us does, and that's why we have this pod.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well,
but
Jeff Jordan said hi to me last week, by the way. So there's that.
There we go.
Yeah.
So here's my logic, and this is why I'm saying Rick kind of lobbed it up to me at the end, which is why I think it's cementing it. Every single year, when it comes to the Hall of Fame, when it comes to receivers, there's always conversations about guys. I remember Shannon Sharp talking about Sterling Sharp one time, and how Sterling, while his career was short, had a very significant chance if it was longer, and still should have a shot at the Hall of Fame because in his limited amount of time, he had some amazing seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so that got me personally. I remember at that time I was like, Sterling Sharp. I definitely heard of him, but let me check because if Shannon, of course this is family, but if Shannon is vouching for his guy, of course his family, but also like a guy that played and had Brett Favre, and Brett Favre was a gunslinger. Like,
absolutely.
How did Sterling do? And I know Sterling led the league in receptions one season.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure, it being with Brett Favre, he had to have had the yards and touchdowns to contend at some point as well. So, Rick, because with the Packers, I'm sticking with this. I think our teamwork is going to get us it here. I'm going to go with Sterling Sharp on the Green Bay Packers.
Yes, Sterling Sharp in 1992 led the league in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. He had 108 catches, 1,461 yards, and 13 touchdowns. You guys got it.
You tried so hard, Justin, to throw us off there with that too. But
yeah.
What's really funny to me though is like you say 92, and I look at Green Bay. They didn't even make the playoffs in 92. They were 9-7.
That's wild.
They were. It's so wild. They were not a good team. They were a good team, but they weren't a great team because that was 92 was like one of those weird years where it was like 4 divisions or 3 divisions or something like that.
That sounds about right.
It was not like, I don't know. It was just surprising to me that they only went 9-7 with that caliber of a roster. Like here, okay. Oh, okay. So they lost a tiebreaker to get into the playoffs to Washington. There they are again, Washington, because Washington had the better conference record than Green Bay. Washington was 7-5 in conference, and Green Bay was 6-6 in conference. By the way, let's appreciate a time when we remember that was also when Seattle was in the AFC and when they were the Houston Oilers, not the Tennessee Titans. That takes me back a ways. By the way, Justin, the Jets were 4-12 that year, so nothing really changed.
I was gonna say, it sounds like it could have been today.
Yeah, it was not good. Not good.
Death, taxes, and the Jets being mediocre or worse throughout the decades, apparently, and causing pain for several generations.
Yeah, I'm looking back at this Jets roster, and I really wish I hadn't looked at this Jets roster in 92 because it's not good.
I think for fun, because we talked about what Rick's reviews could be in the future, I think Rick reviewing random NFL seasons and random Jets rosters, or just any roster, I totally expected one day for Rick to be like, you know what? I want to walk you guys through the 1984 Seattle Seahawks roster. I'm like, all right, let's go for it. I'm down.
You know who was a tight end on the Jets in 1992? And I hate to say this because he turned out to be an okay head coach, but Ken Wisenhunt was a tight end for the Jets in 1992. Yeah, their quarterback that year was Browning Nagel. When you have a name like Browning Nagel, you should be on the Cornell Quiz Bowl team, not playing football. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say that sounds like he should be a professor at Cornell, or an Ivy League school in general.
I was gonna say, I think my dad has that condition.
A
Browning Nagel.
God. Oh boy.
So once again, our two gems of a segment. Once again, our two gems of segments have absolutely delivered. There is absolutely no question about that. This is delivered once again. So thank you, Rick, for your review of the week. Thank you, Justin, for your amazing trivia. It takes a lot of brain power, so there may be some weeks where the guys got to take a break because it takes a lot of creativity. But hey, when we got them, when they're here, we're gonna enjoy it for as long as we can because it is a whole barrel of fun. Now, speaking of a barrel of fun, like I said off the top, man, oh man, the NFL was not done giving us news to stomach this week. Literally and figuratively for me, as I was at work, both these times that things popped off, and also working the wheel when both pieces of news popped off. So gotta love it when all that stuff completely collapses and caves in a show in and on itself.
Yeah,
we will start with the quarterback who we actually spoke about last week, funny enough, fellas, and who could have been moved. We are going to talk about Matty Ice, who said at the top, former MVP of the Atlanta Falcons, was drafted by the organization way back when, threw a touchdown on his first drive. I want to say it may have even been his first pass in his NFL career.
Mm-hmm.
So a guy who's meant a lot to that organization, was a very consistent force. I think, Rick, you kind of detailed it last week, where after the scandal with Michael Vick and after some inconsistency there, for them to get a Matt Ryan and to have him be the sturdy quarterback for that franchise for as long as he was, I think it did mean a lot. But obviously, with them going at Deshaun Watson, just as in Greek mythology, when Icarus flies too close to the sun and falls, there are consequences. And while nobody died, technically speaking, from this, Matt Ryan's tenure in Atlanta technically rested in peace. As he wanted a trade, Atlanta acquiesced to their franchise quarterback and former MVP, and they moved him over to the Indianapolis Colts, one of the popular teams in the quarterback market this offseason. There are a majority who they were still talking to everyone. They were talking about Baker. They were talking about Jimmy G after they had moved on from Carson Wentz. They get who they hope to be their guy for at least a 2-year stretch. And it kind of looks like that way, considering they guaranteed the rest of his contract that they have to pay off. A lot of it still needs to be paid off by Atlanta. But let's continue to the breakdown in and of itself. Rick, I'm going to go to you. I forget off the top of my head where you stood on the Matt Ryan saga last week and where you thought and I don't mean to bring it up if you were wrong. I just I forget. So if depending from what you thought last week to what happened, what do you think changed or occurred in that period of time that led to this pretty quick turnaround on when he had to get traded here?
I'm going to start off by giving credit where credit is due, because Justin called this correctly. Justin said Ryan was going to Indianapolis. I said he was going to stay in Atlanta for a year, groom their next quarterback, and then retire. But I think what happened was, like you spoke about last week, Jurgen, like nowadays quarterbacks with egos are kind of a little soft in this way. The minute that you talk about moving somebody from a team they've been with their entire time, their feelings get hurt. And so Matt Ryan was, I think, out the door without actually being out the door. And so having a team like Indianapolis swoop him up really would amounted to just a third-round pick for the number 2 quarterback in the 2008 draft was a bit surprising that it happened, but I think in a way it makes a lot of sense for Matt Ryan, because Justin, he was talking last week about the weapons that Indianapolis has in Pittman and Pascal and Mo Alley Cox, who I mentioned, it gets them a quarterback who knows how to play in a dome system. That way he can continue to prosper. Because, I mean, ideally, Indianapolis was not going to stay with Sam Ehlinger as their number 1. So getting a true number 1 like Matt Ryan in the building to both teach Ehlinger or whoever they draft, if they draft somebody else as a potential pick, is a great option for them. Now, I think, too, the interesting thing is that what Indianapolis did was that they converted about $12 million of the money that Ryan was owed into a signing bonus, which meant that they freed up $6 million in cap space for somebody or something in the future. So it might be a case where they might say, hey, let's go up and let's try and trade up into the top 10 or top 5 and try and get a higher value pick that might be someone who can help, Matt Ryan or help this offense and help these weapons out. So it's an interesting thing that the Colts did that, and I think it helps out with Ryan's contract as well, because it gives him a little bit less of a money hook, and he's not the albatross. But at the same time, it allows the Colts to be able to move some pieces around to make them a little more of a significant factor in the AFC South, which we talked about last week, with Tennessee being the number 1 and Jacksonville progressing. And I will die on that hill. They're progressing with the free agents they signed. It actually makes sense that they would try and make this move. So I once again, I give kudos to Justin for picking it correctly, and I give kudos to the Colts for making a smart, I think, sensible, smart move.
You there for a sec.
Hey, it's your first podcast, Jurgen? Come on now.
Nowhere near it, actually. So, Justin, I want to throw this over to you because, like Rick said, you did get this right. And I kind of want to bring this up because, we were talking about the depth in just the AFC West in and of itself, how potentially there is a division out there that could see all 4 teams make the playoffs in 1 year because of this new format. And if there is a division to do that, it would be the AFC West. But I don't want to focus more so on that. I just want to focus on teams that have a strong chance in making the playoffs. We'll just go off of that measurement. The AFC West, that's 4 teams. The Chiefs, the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Broncos, right? So we have those 4 stocked in. In the AFC South, the Tennessee Titans won the division, so let's just keep them there. Rick, I do agree with you. The Jaguars will look better, but I still don't think this is the year for playoffs for them. So we have 5 teams still so far. Now we go to the AFC North. The Cincinnati Bengals, of course, defending AFC champions. They made some additions to that team. Joe Burrow, if healthy, that's the key, but if healthy, they're going to be up there because he does give them a chance to win games. So that's 6. I don't like the Steelers, and I think they're going to regress anyway. So, boop. Cleveland Browns, we talked about how they were a quarterback away. They got that quarterback now. So that makes it interesting. Now, how many games is he going to play is the question. How will they do? It's very 50-50. So we could take it or leave it on if we want to put him there. I'm just going to put them there, assuming Watson still plays over half the games. And then the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson falling out. And now it's the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East. The Patriots made the playoffs last year. And Miami, who we will get to in a couple moments in and of themselves, went 9-8 last year. They were 1 game away from the playoffs the last 2 seasons. So the AFC is loaded. There are a lot of teams in the AFC that have playoff aspirations. Now, granted, obviously, because of only 7 spots, will all those teams make the playoffs? Unless somehow the NFC, is canceled, then we just have all AFC in the playoffs, which may be more entertaining at this point, considering how deep it is. Obviously, those teams will miss out, whether it be due to underperforming, guys out due to injury, and maybe the AFC West cannibalizing itself to the point where one of those teams will miss the playoffs because, just those division games are too rough on it. Who knows, right? But the Colts, obviously, when we look at the landscape of this conference, and it's like, they are how many contending teams for just playoffs? We're talking about playoffs. The Colts had to do something that they felt would give them the shot, and they believe Matt Ryan is. Justin, when you look at Matt Ryan, you called it last week, Matt Ryan to Indy, it making sense. Just detail to the people how this gives the Colts the best possible chance at being that playoff team in this deep conference.
Well, like you said, it is more important than ever to be relevant as a division winner. You're not necessarily going to be guaranteed that playoff spot just making the wild card. And it's very difficult to keep your roster relevant and find that quarterback. The Colts have been relevant now for a couple of years. Their roster has been very strong. They have an excellent defense. That front 4 is something. They haven't been able to find that quarterback since Andrew Luck left. And to capitalize on guys like Jonathan Taylor and that offensive line, having Quentin Nelson there, I know they did lose their other tackle this season, but they need to capitalize on the time that they have with these guys on rookie contracts and things like that. So Matt Ryan going there for just a 3rd-round pick after they got 2 seconds for Carson Wentz, which is another surprise in my book. I think they made out. Clearly the Carson Wentz experiment failed. And a guy like Matty Ice, who, he may be falling off the cliff, but he was just shy of 4,000 yards last year, doesn't make a ton of mistakes. He had 12 interceptions last year, but I think that might also partially be on the lack of receivers. Calvin Ridley wasn't there a lot of the time. He had some other young players. I think he's going to thrive there in Indy. And once again, Indy will be relevant in the AFC.
Yeah, no. I think too, like you mentioned, Justin, like Kyle Pitts being the number 4 pick last year wasn't the smartest thing Atlanta could have done because it gave them a weapon, but a tight end, which is the highest they ever picked the tight end or haven't been picked. So I think it's a good move. My only concern if I'm Indianapolis, if I'm that fan base, is we just went from a Carson Wentz for a year to a Matt Ryan for a year, maybe 2, possibly 2, probably 2, but it's kind of like a carousel in a sense where, you talk about offensive coordinators that come in and quarterbacks that have to adapt to that system. Well, wide receivers have to adapt to the quarterbacks as well, whether it's the timing of their snap count or whether it's, their preferences on how they're going to throw or how many steps they take on the drop back. So if I'm guys like Pittman and Pascal, I want to make sure that I get with Matt Ryan as quickly as I can to establish a rhythm, because I think timing is everything for football, especially for wide receivers. And if their timing's off with Matt Ryan, it's going to be a slow first couple weeks in Indianapolis for them.
Well, he's certainly not the long-term answer there. The GM, Chris Ballard, is excellent at drafting. It's going to come to the time where they're going to have to trade up. And if it's not this year, I expect it to be next year at the end of Matt Ryan's 2-year extension. But they're going to eventually have to address that long-term quarterback situation.
Absolutely.
And hey, who knows? Maybe they eye a quarterback here that's projected to go in the second or third round, and they're like, let's let this kid develop for 2 years and see what could happen. Because while the quarterback class is not elite top tier as it is in normal years, I think I've heard some people praise some. I want to stress some. A very handful of the quarterbacks you could get in the second and third is possibly just guys to just let them sit there and hey, let's see if they can develop. Carson Strong, I think, is the most popular name one I've heard in regards to that. I think a lot of people, at least that I know of, have been high on Carson Strong as a day 2 pick of like, hey, you let him sit behind a guy for a year or two, could end up doing good for you. Who knows? Maybe the Packers will use the first round pick on him as well and still have Jordan Love on the roster for some reason. But Justin, I think like you guys accentuate both points really well. I think at the end of the day, Matt Ryan was the move the Colts were going to make because it also cost them less. Because if you want to believe it, with the Browns and what they were saying about Baker, how they wanted to have a high asking price right now for Baker, it's definitely going to have to come down if they are going to end up getting rid of him. But their initial price for asking is too high. Same with the 49ers and Jimmy G, where it almost feels like he's going to end up staying there, as weird as it is, considering all that transpired really at the end of their season. So that'll still be a situation to keep an eye on. I think Matt Ryan to the Colts just made sense, and they didn't have to give up a lot for him. And now you have a guy, again, Justin, I think you said it best. This guy lost his top 2 weapons over the last couple of years and still a positive touchdown interception ratio, 20 touchdowns last year, 26 the year before that. Like, this is a guy who still throws the ball extremely well. And I think that's big when it comes to, what Indy needs right now. I'm definitely with Rick. I think they need to find that next guy. But until you do that, I don't think Matt Ryan's a bad stopgap, especially and I'm going to assume it will be 2 years because I think the other quarterbacks they had aside from Carson Wentz, like Phillip Rivers came in, knew it was going to be a one and done deal. I think Matt Ryan is a guy that they know will be there for 2 years. Now, we're moving on to wide receiver news. Now, we do have a wide receiver that was traded, and we will get to him. But before that, because this is the beauty of going live with it, and everyone gets to see our reaction to news live. Justin, you have a little bit of breaking news. So Justin will be the Adam Schefter of the podcast, for everyone wondering. You have a little bit of news to tell us. So, tell us your sources. Tell us how you have already gone to the top of the sports NFL media landscape. And what do you got for us, bud?
Well, according to Pro Football Focus Bet, which is a pro PFF account, they are reporting that DK Metcalf is being shopped around by Seattle. He's apparently favored to go to the New York Jets at plus 5,500, but 550. But he is being shopped apparently, according to the insiders in Seattle, and one expert expects him to be moved before the draft.
Wow. So that is big news. So DK Metcalf, the former second-round pick of the Seattle Seahawks, has had a solid start to his career so far. A guy who a lot of people looked at the very beginning and thought he was just going to be a physical guy, and were wondering what his skills were. Especially because I think I want to say he struggled with the 3-cone at his draft combine, but has made out pretty well so far in his pro career. Helps having Russell Wilson, but he still looked good, relatively good this past season without Russ. Rick, your immediate reaction, if you want to get into the Jets aspect, you can, but just DK Metcalf being moved. Yet another signal that things are changing in Seattle. I personally really do want to know why Pete Carroll's still there. I think he should probably just let it go at this point. I mean, I know the man loves football, but come on. But what does DK Metcalf potentially being moved mean to you?
Well, I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to a couple of different things. I feel like, you have to kind of read between the lines a little bit based upon what Metcalf said when his most recent appearance with Kevin Garnett on his show, where he said, it's his time to lead in Seattle. It's his time. So because there's no Russell Wilson, there's no Bobby Wagner, Legion of Boom is gone. All of what they once had is gone. So really, it's Metcalf's time in Seattle to kind of be the star. The problem is Metcalf's at the end of his contract, so he's going to command a lot of money, dollar bills, y'all, for DK Metcalf going into the next year. And if I'm Seattle, I don't have a good enough quarterback in that room right now to throw to him. I don't have enough weapons around him. I don't have a good enough defense to hang on to that. It's kind of a matter of, preparing for the future by getting rid of the future to create a new future. It's like entering a new timeline in the Infinity Stone and like in the metaverse or whatnot. Because you could enter a future with Metcalf as a wide receiver, but if no one's there to throw him the ball, what's that going to be? You could enter a future where Metcalf is gone, but then what'd you get back? Or you could enter a future where Metcalf is gone, but you have picks. So if the Jets are the leader, and I've also heard, and I've also looked a little bit from Sports Illustrated, Vito Churko is reporting that it could be the Lions that are also in position to possibly land him, which could be a big pickup for Detroit as well. If it's one of those two teams, then I feel like the nature of the beast is that they're going to give up a good deal for him, because this is a 24-year-old player. This is a player who's entering the prime of his career. So it's not a third-round pick. It's not a second-round pick. It might be a case where the Seahawks, if it's with the Jets, get that first pick that they had from the Jamal Adams trade back and then some for DK Metcalf. It would solve a lot of the Jets' problems, but is that price too high? And I think this leads into the Tyreek Hill trade, which I don't want to jump ship on right away because I know there's more to it, but you got to wonder, is the price too high for some of these receivers to command? If you're looking at what these receivers are getting in trades, is the price too high for a team like the Jets, who knows they're not going to be as good as the rest of the division this year? Do you mortgage your future on a player who, one bad cut on the turf and that's a torn ACL, that's torn Achilles, and he's out and he's never the same? So it's a real question mark.
Well, so Justin, I want to throw it to you with the very end of what Rick was talking about when he mentions the recent receiving trade packages we've seen. And of course, Devonta Adams and Tyreek Hill are the two guys there. I have to think, and of course, DK Metcalf is a good receiver, don't get me wrong, and he's going to continue to be great, I think, for the next, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. But at the same time, I think with Rick mentioning Hill and Adams, I think it makes sense because there's always frameworks that guys start at. But I also think if you're Seattle, I agree with Rick, it's not just going to be a one-pick deal. But can they realistically demand a package like that when you think about it? Because Devonta Adams, this is a guy the last couple of years has led the league in touchdowns in a season, has been up there in receptions. This is the guy who's made several All-Pro teams. Tyreek Hill in his career, I want to say 3, 4 All-Pro teams, some Pro Bowls, a Super Bowl championship. Those are guys with real pedigree and resume. DK Metcalf, I know, he's got all the tools that we've seen from him. He's had some good campaigns, but also the few times that we've seen Seattle in the playoffs with him, he didn't perform. He got locked down by Jalen Ramsey in his most recent playoff appearance. I want to say maybe it was something along the lines of 2 for 20, 2 for 19. I'm not talking about a special that you would get at Applebee's or Golden Corral. I'm talking about what his stats were in a game. So do you realistically think that Seattle can ask for that kind of trade package? Because for me, on first glance, I think they'd have to ask for something less than what Adams and Tyreek Hill got.
Well, I will say I've really been interested in the way that the wide receiver market has shifted this year. It's so interesting to me because while their trade value has dropped with guys like Tyreek Hill and Devonta Adams going for a first and then a couple other ones, when in other years they would have gone for two firsts and something else. But at the same time, they've simultaneously earned more money with Christian Kirk's guaranteed contract going up and raising that level. So if he is traded, he will be still owed a ton of money. If the Jets were going to get away with trading 2 seconds for Tyreek Hill, I can't imagine that the Seahawks are going to get back that value or more. Tyreek Hill's won a Super Bowl. He's led the league. He's been that guy. DK Metcalf is still early in his career, but I agree. I don't think it's right for him to stay in Seattle at this point. Receivers to me are these splash pieces. They're the jewels in the crown of a team that's ready to win a championship. And Seattle's just they've started to rebuild. He's not going to be there when they need him to be at this level. So you might as well take the picks back, get the assets back while you can. Don't ruin his relevance. Trade him for what you can and try and build up your team. If he's a free agent in 5 years and you think you're ready, offer him the money. That's the great time. Maybe he'll want to go back to Seattle. But as of right now, what do they have? It'd be Drew Lock and Geno Smith are going to be their starters. Their offensive line's in shambles. They're paying $100 million for 2 safeties. I don't see him being their answer there. So
and their starting left tackle. Their starting left tackle also is still a free agent out there. That we will also get to in a bit. Rick, you have a little bit more of an Well, I don't know if this is an update that you've seen because I'm not on my phone presently, or just an idea that you have in regards to DK.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead into our rundown, but my thought process is that Metcalf is probably going to wait based upon what the Seahawks do in the quarterback room, because there's a lot of discussion about Baker Mayfield, about him possibly going to Seattle, I think a lot of the experts are picking. But, I'm looking around and I'm thinking, I'll give you a contributor, DJ Siddiqui over at Forbes. has an article out that's called "Why the Seahawks Should Avoid a Baker Mayfield Trade," and this is the one sentence that sticks out in my mind. He says, "It literally serves the Seahawks zero advantage to acquire a quarterback that no team covets." So if you get Baker Mayfield because nobody else wants him, that's not the reason to get Baker Mayfield, unless it's because getting Mayfield will help you lock in Metcalf. Will say, hey, I've got a young quarterback. We'll work together. Because I think he'll look at Geno and Drew Lock and say, I don't really want to be in that room. But if the Seahawks make a play for Baker Mayfield, will they have to give up Metcalf in the long run?
Oh, there we
go. But I'm saying, would it keep Metcalf in the long run? I mean, if Mayfield goes to Seattle, that might keep Metcalf in the West Coast and the upper Pacific Northwest for a while. So that's just an idea that I had. That it's again, it's a good article from Forbes, DJ Siddiqui, excellent contributor, and just a possibility that Seattle might make a move to spare a move or might decline a move to make a move.
And I think the initial report that Justin saw is key, that there's a timeline, at least as of now. Now things change, of course. This could be completely different even a week or two from now in terms of thinking. But they've set a timeline that they believe, at least by draft time, that's going to happen. So we are weeks away from this potentially going down, if we are to believe that this is the deadline that they've set for themselves. Yeah. Do teams break their own deadlines all the time? Oh, yeah. So we'll wait to see if that follows through. But it is something definitely worthwhile because, again, this is just another receiver that could be on the move this offseason, whether it be via free agency or the most popular way as of late, trade. Speaking of wide receivers being traded, of course, we will get to the last big-time trade that happened, for now, in the NFL offseason to date, and that was the bombshell that happened. Tyreek Hill moved from the Kansas City Chiefs, the team that has made the AFC Championship game for 4 years in a row, who has been a stud for Patrick Mahomes and in that Chiefs offense, who made a big play or two in that Super Bowl that they won. Tyreek Hill is gone, and he is taking his talents to South Beach, not to play for the Miami Heat, but to play for the Miami Dolphins. He is going back home, as he said, to play in Miami. And it never hurts, guys, when you go back home to also become the highest paid player at your position of all time and get the richest contract of all time, signing a signed a 4-year, $120 million contract. And I want to say it was like 72 or 75 million guaranteed or so. Get the numbers around there. Whole lot of money, as Antonio Brown would say. Now, this trade seemingly popped out of nowhere. It popped from my perspective, because we've kind of said what I do. It popped off about like a half hour before the noon Sports Center started, and it continued to be the main topic. And then, boom, the trade happens. Now, while to a lot of people, it seemed like it was only within an hour or two time frame, this deal really began, I think, to Agent Zero, Patient Zero, as we'll have to call him now, with Christian Kirk. I think Christian Kirk, as we've spoken about already, guys, has started a chain reaction in this league of wide receivers wanting to get money. And just wait until Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown are due contracts. You wait. Cooper Kupp as well. So I think it starts with Christian Kirk. I think Hill was mulling it over. And then he saw the Devontae Adams deal. And it's like, I need to get me some of that right there. Not in Las Vegas in particular, but I need to get me some of those dollars. And he went to Kansas City. I think, from all intents and purposes, I think he wanted to stay in KC. I think he wanted to stay with Mahomes. But when it was made very clear that they were going to be unable to make him the highest paid receiver, they worked out a trade. And it became the Jets and the Dolphins at the end of it. And both teams, again, from all the reporting, had offers. Kansas City willing and did accept both offers. They put the choice in Tyreek Hill's hands. And when you have the power of the sun in your hands, are you going to New York? Or are you going to the Sunshine State? And Tyreek Hill said, take me home, dollars. Take me home, dollar roads, country roads, and all that good stuff. As I try to make more pop culture references, let's get down to it. Tyreek Hill, fellas, was moved to the Miami Dolphins for a treasure trove of draft picks, 5 in particular to be exact, headlined by a first-round pick this year, a second-round pick, futures as well. I also think a random 4th or 5th was also sent back Kansas City's ways, which is kind of funny. Also send Miami's way in that deal as well. So Tyreek Hill in a 4th, just, guys, boom, right there. Why not? So all that aside, Justin, I'm going to go to you first. Because I think the funnier thing here will be for to ask Rick about the heartbreak of it. So I'm going to go with you first. What does the Tyreek Hill move do for Miami, not just for this season, but for the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years?
Well, I do want to say also, before I get to that, the idea of these wide receivers needing money, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, and DK Metcalf, all rumored guys that might be moving, all talking contract extensions at this point. I think it's an excellent move from Miami. They're not going to get Tyreek Hill with any of those draft picks, or at least the odds of them getting Tyreek Hill in those draft picks was very low. They now have the fastest offense in the league. Their wide receivers are burners across the board. They're going to be able to catch the ball at all three phases. They kept Gesicki. They signed Teron Armstead. They are making a huge play at saying, hey, Tua is our guy this year, and if he doesn't prove it, we're in the market because we got 2 draft picks next year in the first round. They went all in, and honestly, I feel bad for Kansas City. I feel like they did everything they could to keep him there, and it didn't work out. They did a good job getting his money off the book because now they have some cap space to maybe sign a couple guys, but MVS and Juju Smith-Schuster are not going to replace the production that that Tyreek Hill had, in my opinion. They're gonna struggle for that deep threat.
Well, I think it's funny you mentioned that because I also want to throw this in another idea too, Rick. So I think they have a chance combined at least to maybe make up for the numbers, but I don't think they'll have the same impact that Tyreek Hill had, which when he was out there was a legitimate fear in the opposing defense that he's just going to go straight past you. Now, while defenses were starting to play Kansas City better, especially in that middle portion of the season when they did struggle, we did see then Kansas City adapt to that. And Tyreek Hill, as always, playing a big role there. This was my mindset when it came to that deal and why I did like it for the Dolphins, because I think the thing is that the number one thing people go to whenever we see a contract like this for a non-quarterback is, well, you can't pay a wide receiver, or you can't pay insert name of position that just got paid here, that kind of money. Here's my thing with it. When you have an Aaron Rodgers, when you have a Patrick Mahomes, if Tom Brady was making the same amount as those guys, but he always likes to take pay cuts because everyone forgets his wife makes more than him, so that's why he can do it. But when you have the top 5 to 8 quarterbacks in the game, when you have those guys, you don't pay the receivers this. Why do you think Green Bay traded Devontae Adams? Why do you think Kansas City just did that? Because they're also banking on the fact that our Hall of Fame quarterback is going to help make up for this. Other teams don't have Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. There's a reason why some teams constantly go back into the draft cycle year after year to look for their next quarterback, because they don't have that guy yet. So, and Rick, this is where I throw it to you. Well, if Kansas City had done this, I think there would have been more question marks, because then, first off, the salary cap gymnastics they've already had to do to this point is wild. If they had somehow kept Tyreek Hill doing all this, I think you got to give them an award of some sort, because how the heck are they handling all that, keeping all that on one team? But obviously they don't. They send him to Miami, and it makes sense because Tua still has 2 years left on a contract. And like Justin said, because they still got some assets in the bank there, if they ultimately decide that they want to hit a reset at the quarterback, then you reset the rookie contract with 4 more years of a new QB. So with that in mind, Rick, with that context, what was your reaction to Hill to Miami specifically? And then what was the heartbreak like when you realized that the Jets honestly were that close to getting the guy?
Were they though? I mean,
I want to be nice.
I mean, no, because you're right, because they had 2 competing offers out there. But if you listen to Tyreek Hill's press conference when they asked him, one of the stooges and like us in the pit asked him, how close were you to picking the Jets? He literally was like, "Who? What? Huh? I was always going to come here." So Tyreek Hill liked to be fawned over. He liked to have different people that were going after him. The Jets never had a chance. But let's lay our cards on the table here. New York is not a wide receiver town. It's not. Beckham learned that the hard way because his antics weren't cute. The one-hand catch was great, but his antics weren't cute, and he was run out, and it was time for him to go. New York has always been about the quarterbacks and about like the running backs, about the tough runners, the Tiki Barbers, the Adrian Morels, the Curtis Martins, the Joe Namaths, Eli Mannings, what have you. It's never been a wide receiver town, basically. So I think if the Jets had Tyreek Hill, they were never going to match and make him the highest paid wide receiver in the league. And that's not something that the Jets are going to do if they get DK Metcalf. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen, because that's just not the way that New York football works. And I think it's a matter of understanding that going in. Now, going into the Dolphins, going to that scenario, everyone's forgetting that Teddy Bridgewater is also in Miami now. And look, yeah, Tua could be not great. And I agree, they could wait for rookies to get there. But Teddy Bridgewater is also there, who's been a journeyman quarterback now, but who's also a guy who knows how to play in a good system. You have guys like Waddle and Gesicki who are there. You have Armstead. Mike McDaniel is going to go into his very first game as a head coach with a lot of weapons in his arsenal that he can utilize, especially now with Tyreek Hill. But it's one of those things where it's almost like, how many weapons are too many weapons? Because here's the thing. You can only throw the ball as far as you can throw the ball. If you send Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and they run a 50-yard dash in 4.6 seconds, but it takes Tua 5.2 seconds to throw the ball 50 yards, they're already past them. They're already gone. So in theory, you have to make sure that Tua is up to snuff, or pull the trigger and say, Teddy, get in there and do what you do best right away. Because it is a lot of pressure on Tua Tagovailoa now. It is. And I think it's a matter of, he's got all these weapons around him, but is his recovery done? And is he the Tua that was the most feared collegiate quarterback in the Alabama system at the time that he was in college? If he's not that, if he's I forget what his brother's name in Maryland, but if he's him, then it's not going to work. It's not going to fly in Miami. So you get all these weapons, and that's great. And Tyreek Hill's close to home, and he's got all his money, and that's great. But, if the quarterback's not there in the room, what's the win? What's the war total, basically? What you get one more win because of Hill, because Tagovailoa is not ready and Bridgewater's capable but not as capable. It's a gamble. It's a big gamble, and I think we'll see if it pays off, because Miami's the team that they needed to make a gamble because of the division, because of Buffalo's stackness. And you're right, they were a game away from making the playoffs with Brian Flores, and now that he's gone, and now they have a new coach and a new philosophy, a new mindset, we'll see. We'll see if it works out. But I wouldn't have wanted Tyreek Hill on the Jets anyways, because invariably any team that I root for, whether it's the Jets or the Mets, they get a star and they turn out to be a bust. So
especially when you pay them.
Oh my God, I can go. Well, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a big one for me. Like, I loved him on the Show Me contract, but once he got his money, he was terrible. I'm sorry. Harvard education doesn't buy you a winning season, So that's kind of how I look at it.
A brain of a Harvard grad, but heart of a plumber, as they always said. But couldn't throw any more like he did that one season. Fitzmagic really turned to Fitztragic real quick in NYC. I think ultimately, and I think the three of us will agree on this. This is the Tua, you got to show us what you got here. You got to show us who you are. Because I think the thing with Tua's first 2 years is that if you have to point to Brian Flores' head coaching tenure as a Dolphin on the field, the biggest failure was he could just never get that offense consistent. And even aside from Tua, he had 3 different offensive coordinators in 2 years. It was coming out that there were essentially 2 different guys trying to be offensive coordinator this season in Miami. That's not stable. That's not good. While I do like Brian Flores, and I think he was, for a Belichick disciple, pretty successful when you think about it, overachieved in his first year when they should have gone like 1-16 or 1-15, 0-16. When you think of the last 2 years being a game away, which that first close year, especially, like, they were ahead of the process of how close they should have been to the playoffs. Like, he was successful, but ultimately the failure is not helping to develop Tua. And I think all these moves, now that it's weapons, it's certainly a case, Rick, you kind of talk about it. It's like, you got to get all these guys their touches, and it's very going to be a game-by-game basis. I think this is ultimately let's see who Tua really is. Is he the guy who could have and should have won the Heisman his one full year at Alabama, that year that Kyler won it? Or is he a good quarterback? He could still be a good quarterback, above average, but he's not going to be worth the 5th overall pick that they had used to take him, when the very next selection, it was good old Justin Haircut out there, who's enjoying the sunshine and rainbows in LA, California.
Well, this Justin Haircut as well is enjoying sunshine and rainbows too. Let's be honest here.
That's very true.
Yeah, I do want to say quickly, just to your point, Jurgen, and this, I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit on my sports knowledge and sports time. I used to work for the New York Lizards pro lacrosse team in 2017 as their PR director. The Lizards that were with maybe 3 or 4 of the best offensive weapons in the game of lacrosse. Guys like Paul Rabel, guys like Rob Pennell, who the average sports fan might not give a damn about, but lacrosse fans know those names and they love those names. In the middle of the season, the Lizards made a trade with Boston and got a local product, Will Manny, who is one of the best attackers in Boston, to the Lizards for basically nothing. And so the New York Lizards at the time had 3 of the 4 best attackers in all of pro lacrosse. Here's the problem. You only play with 1 ball in lacrosse. So you only play 1 ball in a lot of sports, right? So basically, you have all these weapons, and yeah, you're right. You bring these guys in, they all want to score, but none of them have the ball in their cross, so none of them are going to be able to make the moves. It's the same case here. Like you said, Tua's going to have to give these guys the touches, but he can only throw 1 pass at a time. It's not rapid fire to every single person. So that'll be interesting to see. If you have so many weapons, how's it going to look? Because that year, I'll be honest, the Lizards won 500 that year. They had all these weapons. They did not make the playoffs. So, that could be a case where Miami doesn't make the playoffs again because you have all these weapons. Only one guy's got the ball, can throw it. There you go. That's the answer.
And we have some questions about the guy who can throw it as well.
So
exactly.
The question is also how are you going to cover these guys? That's why you bring in those extra weapons. It's not the same as they all have to touch the ball. They can have an effect on the game without touching the ball in the NFL. All they got to do is get open, and all of a sudden you have other guys compensating. The defense shifts. You're leaving guys wide open. They're going to score touchdowns. A true NFL quarterback will take advantage of it. That's where you got to see if Tua's up to snuff.
Right. Is Tua a true enough NFL quarterback? That's the big thing, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And hopefully, for Miami's sake, and I think for most people's sake, we will get the answer to that because we want to see how legitimate it is. And Tua, will he stay or will he go after this season, I think is going to be the question. Speaking of the guys who will stay or should probably go, but they're still in the same location for some reason, Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo. Of the quarterback movement that we have seen this offseason, we've seen Russell Wilson to Denver, Colorado. We have seen, of course, Matt Ryan, who recently got traded to Indianapolis. We've seen Carson Wentz to the the Washington Commanders. We've seen all these guys get moved here. And now we still have 2 big names left. Well, depends on how you want to equate big to, but we have 2 guys with some pedigree in this league who are yet to be moved. We have one, Baker Mayfield, who helped the Cleveland Browns to their first playoff appearance since they were back in the league and their first playoff win. And we have Jimmy, I'm better looking than 99% of the human population on this planet, Garoppolo, and led the 49ers to being the guy to some NFC championship games, to a Super Bowl, half a quarter away. We all know the story. Both guys are still on their teams. Fellas, I just want to go over these 2 real quick. And we talked about, especially Garoppolo last week, a little bit about Baker as well in terms of what we did at the end. So I'm not going to ask for the same thing exactly, but just to your guys' situation, or to your guys' point of view with both situations, like what is the pulse on each guy? I think we can all agree Baker should get moved. Like, I don't think it's a tenable situation in any way, shape, or form that he can still be on the Cleveland Browns, no matter how many games Deshaun Watson's ultimately suspended for. I think we can all agree on that. But I think Jimmy Garoppolo is the more interesting choice here because where does Jimmy G go? Because it feels like a lot of the spots that he was going to be popularly linked to have been taken. Tampa Bay, potentially, if Tom Brady had stayed retired and Bruce Arians wanting a guy who, could maybe make a play or two as familiar with the way that Brady played. Why not get his former understudy? The Indianapolis Colts with a guy who can do just enough for you in some games and isn't too mistake prone. Jimmy Garoppolo. Like a lot of guys here, or a lot of teams that Jimmy could have fit well on, have just been taken up. So I want to throw it to each of you here. Justin, I will start with you on this one. When it comes to, and of course, if you want to say more about Baker Mayfield that we haven't already talked about, feel free to. But your pulse on the Jimmy Garoppolo situation, is he going to end up staying in San Francisco after all?
I think so. I don't see him really. I don't see them getting enough. The rumor is that San Francisco has a 2nd-round pick on the table for him. Not sure they're really willing to give him up. He is owed a ton of money. I think it would also depend on how much money the other teams are willing to take on. I would look at teams like Carolina. I think Carolina is, kind of done with Sam Darnold. He's favored to be the starter there as of now. They retooled their offensive line. Hopefully Christian McCaffrey's healthy. They won with Darnold at the helm at that situation. I'm sure they could win a few games with Jimmy G.
And Jimmy G being healthier than any of the Carolina quarterbacks they've had the last couple of years as well. Say it's Teddy Bridgewater when he was there, because Teddy was actually pretty healthy for the most part. Just the team around him, like there was still that bad offensive line when Bridgewater was in sweet Carolina. Rick, I want to throw it to you. And again, same thing. If you want to speak more on Baker Mayfield that we haven't already, you can. it almost feels like it should be Seattle, but of course you made note of that article before. But should Seattle just bite the bullet when it comes to Baker? And I think same thing with Justin. It feels like there is only one or two teams left here for Garoppolo. Will San Francisco do so? And are they going to do so with the fact that Trey Lance would have to be the guy at this point, considering the quarterback market? Trey Lance has to be the guy going to next season if they do end up trading Jimmy G.
I mean, I look at it like this. If John Lynch has said, and I think John Lynch has said this, that San Francisco has budgeted enough money for the possibility of Garoppolo coming back. So I feel like he's going to stay. I feel like I'm on that boat now with Justin, where I think he's going to stay in San Francisco, because I think the 49ers look at their future and they look at Trey Lance, and I don't think he's ready yet. I think that he had, one game in college in the COVID season, and then he played 6 of them and started 2 this year, and he wasn't great. He was good, but he wasn't great.
Okay.
So if you have, he was C+. It passes, but I feel like Garoppolo is a guy who you can count on for more consistency and more leverage in that respect. And I feel almost where it's a case where San Francisco has to bite the bullet, because either way, I almost feel like they're going to be on the hook for his salary, even if they trade him and they put him off. So yeah, I can see him staying. With Baker, now Carolina's a possibility in there too, and I think that might be a better fit for him in a way, just because of Carolina's offensive room and Christian McCaffrey, the 5-tool player who can manage all of that. But I do want to say that it might be a case where Seattle might look at the quarterback room, see that there's only those 2 guys left, and they might go to John Lynch and say, what do you want for him? For Garoppolo, what do you want? Because, if Baker's the guy that nobody wants to touch, you're fine. But Garoppolo's got this contract, right? So what's the perspective? The money versus the untouchability of Baker Mayfield. I think it's a very interesting test case. I think we'll have to see what Seattle decides to do, because they're a suitor for a quarterback, but it's almost like they're like, yeah, I don't really want what you got. Who else is in that quarterback room? Can we exhume the body of Johnny Unitas for a game potentially? Can we, can Joe Namath start doing Medicare commercials and come out and play on the field? Something like that.
Hey, maybe another resurgent Jake Delhomme season.
Or convince Hasselbeck to come back from retirement, only to realize it's not Matt, it's Tim Hasselbeck, and think, what have we done? That sort of thing. So I don't know. It's interesting, but if I were to put my money on it, I think Garoppolo's going to stay in San Francisco for one more year.
I think I'm really leaning towards it with you guys, because I think if Matt Ryan or another quarterback was still on the market aside from him and Baker, I think a trade would be more realistic, because I think the thing with San Fran is that I agree with you guys. I don't think Trey Lance is ready yet. I think we saw a little bit from him, but the thing is also who we saw him against. We saw him play against Seattle, and we saw him play against Houston in terms of games that he started. Now, Houston, it's a free game, let's be real here. And Seattle, he didn't play poorly against them per se, but you definitely saw there's the talents there, but at the same time, he's a rookie. Yeah. And being a rookie that wasn't going to play for a lot of the season, this is also the catch-22 of how much you play your rookie quarterback versus sitting him and him learning. It can go either way. You'll see the greatness from a guy sitting for a while, then you see, there was no point to sit him because he just wasn't it. Then you see guys that play immediately and struggle versus guys that play immediately and do great. This is why I think a Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, I think they've kind of skewed the math a little bit on what you expect from your rookie quarterbacks, because those guys played so well. I think Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson this year, it's more akin to what we've used to seeing from rookie QBs in the past. They're going to have their games, but oh God, there's going to be some tough ones because they're going to a bad team. So now Trey Lance is a little bit different because that team was more built when he was there, when they got for him, of course, and he's the quarterback of the future, et cetera, et cetera. But I think as we approach it, I think the scenario is most certainly he's staying there. Jimmy G will be staying a 49er, which I think is better for both sides at the end of the day. It gives one more season for Jimmy G to remain in San Fran. Why not? That West Coast lifestyle that he has to love. At one point being one of the top highest paid QBs because of San Francisco when they first traded for him. So I think it makes sense there. Baker, I'm with you guys. I don't know what the heck they're going to do, but they just need to trade him already because that situation,
I don't think they will.
It's not getting better day by day. And hey, who knows? maybe they don't trade him, and maybe hey,
So,
our show loves chaos. Why not keep him?
well, I think look, there is a rumor that he stays. I think that's the most likely scenario for this point for Baker is an outright release. No one wants to take that contract, and if Deshaun's coming back 6 weeks into the season, why are you holding on to that? Why are you paying him all that money? Why are you taking that dead cap hit? If you do an outright release, maybe someone picks him up on waivers. You don't got to worry about it. Other than that, his career is done in Cleveland. Excuse me.
Well, again, too, as our show went off the air last week, Cleveland got Jacoby Brissett, so they're already set for time without Deshaun Watson. And Brissett's a guy who, let's be honest, is a career backup. He had his druthers as a starter in Indy, but he's a career backup. So I would much rather be comfortable telling Jacoby Brissett, you're going to start 4 games, and then Deshaun's going to come back, and he's going to take over. Versus Baker saying you're going to start 6 games and then Deshaun's going to come back and he's going to take over, because that to me is a non-starter, because Baker Mayfield wants to be a starting quarterback. The thing too that I also just want to point out with Garoppolo, absolutely. Garoppolo's hurt still. Garoppolo may not be fully recovered until June or July. So you're asking a team that wants to trade for Garoppolo to possibly not have him fully healthy by the start of training camp. I think that's a deal breaker as well for these teams too. They're going to look at that and they're going to say, he's a nice piece, but can you prove that he's fully healthy, and can we trust that he's fully healthy? I don't know. It might be a bill of goods that San Fran's trying to sell everybody.
Very, very fair, and ultimately, it's all these external factors that I think is why we're in this situation to begin with.
Yeah.
Ultimately, but we'll wait and see. Of course, the NFL, it never stops sleeping, so we will hopefully get some news on all this in the near future. And I stress in the near future, hopefully not as soon as we get off air so that we miss it again, because that kind of hurt my feelings last week. I'm not gonna lie, that kind of hurt my feelings. I don't like when the news happens after I end shows, because that always happens whenever I podcast. I'm sick of it, dang it. But moving on from all the quarterback talk, let's talk about some other guys who could find new situations here in this new season, guys. To end off this week, kind of like what we did last week, we're going to go a little bit rapid fire here in regards to remaining NFL free agents. I have assigned to me, of course, myself, Justin, and Rick, 3 guys who we're all going to name our personal ideal spots for them, and then 2 guys at the end who we're all going to have a little bit of discourse about, because the 2 guys I have separated, the top 2 guys on this list, I don't think anyone would disagree. So we are going to go rapid fire. We're each going to name, ironically enough, the way I've dealt it, we all have 1 wide receiver, we all have 1 defensive player, and we have 1, I'll call it utility player, that each of us will go into detail as to what team we feel they'd be best fit in. So going to go rapid fire here. I'm going to spin the wheel. That is totally being spun right now, even though there is absolutely no sound effect. And it landed on Rick. So Rick, you're going first. The wheel has landed on you.
Oh, damn. Pat, I want to solve the puzzle. No, I'm kidding.
You are going to start things off with your wide receiver selected for you, Julio Jones. Where is your personal opinion for your best fit for Julio this upcoming season?
So I kind of looked at the spectrum of where wide receivers were and when the different depth charts and whatnot. And I came to a kind of a haunting conclusion for myself as a Jets fan, but it makes the most sense. Julio Jones is going to New England. I think this is going to be one of those things where Mac Jones needs another weapon for the Patriots. I know, Justin, I hate it too, but it makes the most it makes the most sense. Mac Jones needs a weapon. Julio Jones is a short-term number 1 that they can have, because if the Patriots want to draft a wide receiver this year, they want to get a Garrett Wilson or they want to get an Olave to pair up with a Julio Jones, it works with them. And I think he's a guy that's still got some burners in the tank. I think it's going to be a matter of, he's going to help Mac Jones kind of grow a little bit more, because he's a guy that needs to grow a little bit in the Belichick system, in the Belichick tree, in a sense. And I think it's a good fit, because I don't see anybody else wanting to take Julio Jones. I think New England is a smart play for him. It gives him a chance to be.
Excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, okay, but again, but that's the obvious choice. So I went a little out of the box, but I think it's a smart play for Julio Jones, because you're not bumping out a known name because you want to play with your quarterback. It gives him a chance to know what he's worth and also build up a younger arm. So I think I think he goes to New England, and I think it's a 1-year deal. I think it's a 1-year prove-it deal, and I think that just they keep signing him to 1-year deals if he performs well. It's not going to be a long-term thing. And the market will command a long-term thing, but I think Julio is going to just take restructured deals and pay cuts to stay and help out. I think that's the best case for him.
I like, even though he's a little bit older, I like the mercenary for hire, Julio Jones. I like this storyline now. I like this career arc that we're going with Julio Jones. I want a YouTube/TV series now based off of Julio Jones is going to different places for a year, helping teams out, and maybe winning a Super Bowl out of it.
Julio's places.
So one part of the show is Julio being the hired for gun mercenary. The other part is Jameis Winston being the NFC South's, pass around, basically. That's what it is.
Oh yeah. And the narrator, of course, is Ryan Fitzpatrick because he has the most experience in this, of course.
Absolutely. Why not?
So we're making content for everybody else.
Someone's gonna have to call ESPN. Yeah.
So
I wonder if we know somebody who works at ESPN.
Who knows? Moving on from that, Justin, the wheel was just next to my name as it spun to Rick. So naturally, I'm going to make you go next. No, I'm kidding. My guy that I'm going to go here. So my wide receiver that I have is Jarvis Landry. Now, Jarvis, I have 2 teams for. Now, I'm not going to say both. I'm going to stick with one. Don't worry. I'm not going to cheat the game here. Jarvis, I have 2 teams in mind for because I think the 2 teams I had make the most sense for Jarvis because he's coming off an injury-riddled season. He wants to go somewhere. Jarvis has been paid. He could get a little bit of extra money. I think it's kind of the same thing with you, Rick, where Jarvis is a bit younger. I see him getting one more decent deal. Nothing big, but one more decent deal from a team. But would it be this season or would it be next? All depends on who signs him. The team I'm going to go with of who signs Jarvis Landry is he's already played in Ohio. He can play in the cold. Why not go to the frozen tundra that is Green Bay, Wisconsin? Here's why, to me, it makes sense. Because, and Justin, with Odell, funny enough, we got the bestie wide receivers here. While a lot of people are saying that Odell to Green Bay could make sense, he's going to miss at least the first half of the season. Green Bay needs help right now with that wide receiver core. And while Landry is recovering, he also had some injuries last year. He will be the more readily available of the 2 to start next season. And while the Packers, me saying this does not mean the Packers should not attack wide receiver in the draft. They should go after receiving options. Heck, they should attack tight end as well. Because when Mercedes Lewis was the first guy in the first round drafted that Aaron Rodgers ever threw a touchdown to, we have a problem on that roster. So, and I'm sorry if I took away future trivia for you, by the way, Justin. We need to add more weapons there. So, because of that, and I think they do need to add at least 2 rookies from this draft class, it's not bad to bring another veteran there because the veterans that are there right now, one of this guy, I'm saying it strongly, is Alan Lazard. He's been in the league a couple years, showed a couple flashes here and there. I think he could be good, but you need another guy there. Randall Cobb, he stayed there for a reason. He took a pay cut, but Randall Cobb, to me, like if he could be my 3rd or 4th receiver, which is the preference, I would like that. I think Jarvis could come in and essentially do what Randall Cobb's job last season was, but better. I think Jarvis Landry is so naturally talented. I think he would help out Aaron Rodgers. And Jarvis Landry is playing with Aaron Rodgers. Like, I think he would like to play for a really good quarterback. Now, granted, he could have that in Tampa Bay as well. But I think it could make sense for him going to Green Bay. It fits a need, whereas in Tampa, there is a need to be filled. I think they need like a specialized slot receiver. But you also have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, Gronk, if he comes back there. Like, there are other weapons there. I think Jarvis to Green Bay, yes, they're assuming they draft guys. He can be early on that veteran to kind of show everyone like, okay, like this is how we're going to do it with this guy. He could be that veteran for the young guys and help boost the core that's already there. So I think Jarvis to Green Bay makes the most sense. Justin, you complete the trio of wide receivers we're talking about here. I already said the name with Odell Beckham Jr., Super Bowl champion, OBJ.
I had a lot of teams that I thought would be in the mix for him. I think the Rams still are. I don't know if he resigns there at this point. I was thinking maybe Green Bay as well. They do need the help at receiver, possibly Indy. I think they could use a receiver, but let's make a splash move. There's an arms race going on, and I think a team just traded their top receiver. I think he'd be an excellent fit in Kansas City. Coming in late in the year, they need that extra production. Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster there. All of a sudden, 6, 7, 8 games into the year, Odell starts. They replace that production. They all of a sudden have replaced that issue. Rick, you're cringing. I could see it. But the issue was
Yes,
there was 2 receivers there. It was Tyreek Hill, it was Travis Kelce, and there was no one else. And all you had to do was guard those 2 guys. They signed 2, mid-level guys. They could sign Odell, and all of a sudden they have a bevy of weapons to really accentuate what Patrick Mahomes can do.
Wow.
Tear it up, Rick.
It's the only thing that I would say is that you're not really replacing Tyreek Hill because
None
but
of those players are that explosive. But
in a sense though, they do already have his replacement on the roster in Mecole Hardman in theory. But jeez, Beckham and Schuster with Kelce there as well,
and Scantling
and Hardman. Yeah, and that's a nice pick. That's a nice choice.
I look at it like the Calvin Johnson the Calvin Johnson effect. He was a fantastic receiver, easily. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame, probably one of the best ones I've ever seen play. As soon as he left, Matthew Stafford's numbers went up. All of a sudden, he was hitting all these other guys because he wasn't forcing the ball to that one threat. Now you're going to have 3 guys that can catch the ball all over the field. Odell's got great hands. He's not necessarily that separation guy, but you could throw it in his direction in a pinch. Scantling will stretch the field. Juju could do both. That's a good answer for them there.
I'm gonna use your logic against you though. Beckham becomes a black hole in that Kansas City offense and demands Mahomes throws the ball all the time.
There's a cure for every ailment, and it's called winning.
It's called not signing Odell.
Justin, that is pretty creative because
if you win, Odell all of a sudden he's got nothing to complain about. He wasn't getting the ball in the beginning of the trade in LA. He didn't say a word.
And look what happened in the playoffs.
New place.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when they needed him, he came through. He made the catches. He made the big plays. And he was the guy there. I don't think Odell's the black hole that everyone says he is.
Same.
When they're losing and not throwing him the ball, that's an issue.
Yeah. And let's also be real here. Had he been healthy for the whole Super Bowl, I think the Rams win that game by a little bit more than just the final second drive.
Absolutely. He was dominating.
The Bengals could not stop him. They just couldn't. And Eli Apple went from being burnt by Odell Beckham Jr. to being burnt by Cooper Kupp. So, I mean, maybe that was the formula at the end of the day, but still, you couldn't stop him. So that's a great pick there. And I think it just sticks with the idea that you bring him on. It's going to be a slow start, especially coming back from injury. But Odell with having Mahomes, it does make sense. So we're just going to circle back around. Quick go around, Justin. We're going to start with you when it comes to the defensive player. You have former defensive player of the year, Stephon Gilmore. He's proven to be a shutdown corner at his peak years. He's a little bit past that, but still a more than serviceable starter. I think the right team could use Gilmore in the right position. Where do you have Gilmore going, Justin, for your best fit?
That's a good question. I had heard rumors that he was possibly going to LA, and I think that'd be an excellent fit for him. They could use the secondary help there. Every team needs a good cornerback. He's a good physical cornerback. He was rated very well rated very well in Pro Football Focus in the 8 games that he played. Can he stay on the field? It'll depend on how much money they're willing to give him. I think that's kind of why he's sticking around, is because he feels his value is pretty high, but he's got an injury history. He hasn't been the same guy the last 2 years. So it'll be interesting. But I think Vegas Raiders would be an excellent fit for him.
Well, not bad, especially, I mean, hey, you're only continuing the arms race in the AFC West there, and I think that would be the place to just continue to stack it up there. I think that was it. Oh, well then, what a mistake. I have misread the papers. I think I need to put on my glasses and do my best Steve Harvey impression here, because I read the list wrong, ladies and gentlemen.
Miss Columbia, you win Miss Universe. Great, awesome, thanks.
Hey, this is the chaos of the show. This is just the fun of it, and also it is just me being blind and probably needing my glasses again. You live and you learn. So I mean, Justin, do you want to give us who your original guy was, and I just made you do all that for nothing?
It's up to you. I can pass it along to Rick if he wants. I mean, up to you.
I mean, Rick had a whole thing planned. I don't want to take it away from him. I mean, I kind of already did, but.
Well, okay, so I'll go with my guy, and then we can see what Rick's take on Gilmore is. I had Calais Campbell. I think that he's a freak of nature. He's 38 years old now. He'll be 36 by the start of the season.
I was about to say
still
he that old.
productive.
Yeah.
He's still crazy productive. He was, a huge run stuffer on the number one run defense last year. And if he doesn't return, which honestly I think would probably be the best fit for him, is the Ravens. But if I'm going to go spicy here, let's look at some teams that needed a run defense last year. And if it wasn't the Pittsburgh Steelers, it would be the Los Angeles Chargers. I almost was thinking San Diego was the right one. Both two teams.
I mean, I think we've
were
all said San Diego at
horrendous.
some point.
Yeah, both two teams were horrendous against the run last year. San Diego was third worst in the league. Pittsburgh Steelers were dead last. Both two teams could desperately need a run stuffer like Calais Campbell. I think he'd be an excellent fit on either one. It'll depend on whether or not he wants to go to a contender. If he's going to go to a contender, I assume he chooses the Chargers. If not, that Pittsburgh defense with a run stuffer could be real nasty.
I think you make a lot of sense there because Calais Campbell as a run stuffer is still great. Still has a little bit of pass rush as well. Like you saying his age, it just reminded me like, dang, he's been in the league for a long time, and he's
long time.
Good. And it was still very vital for Baltimore in this time as well. So that's
imagine that flip to Pittsburgh. Oof, that'd be something.
I think that would work even more because of TJ Watt as well being there. So that would just work all the way around. Rick.
Hi, I'm here too. Hi. Okay,
I'm just blind, so that's
welcome
all
back to the pod, Rick.
So Rick was the one that originally had Gilmore. I misread my notes, aka I'm pretty sure I'm dyslexic in some way, shape, or form, which wouldn't surprise any of us. Rick, you were the one that originally had Stephon Gilmore. My stupidity aside, where did you have Stephon Gilmore going?
So just to piggyback off of Justin, I think the two defensive players that we mentioned here are good fits to stay where they are. So Calais Campbell stays in Baltimore, I think. Gilmore's an interesting case because Gilmore's been getting a lot of traction with other teams. Kansas City would want him because that would replace Tyrann Mathieu. That would be a good replacement for them. Philadelphia, if you believe what his wife says, that they want to make a move for him. But I think if I'm Gilmore, I look at what Carolina has done in free agency, how they've gotten Xavier Woods, how they've re-signed Dante Jackson. Gilmore's the number one corner in Carolina, I think. Even though he only played 8 games last year, I think it makes sense for him at this point in his career to kind of just stay there in Carolina. It's not ideal, and it's definitely not a pick that's trendy. But I feel like it makes the most sense for him to kind of just hang on there because they've rebuilt that defense, they've rebuilt that secondary, and I think Gilmore kind of being the leader of that in likeness and in name, him and Xavier Woods kind of tie in that sense, I think works out. So I would feel like Gilmore stays in Carolina.
I think that's more than fair, especially because Carolina, I mean, they drafted a young corner as well in last year's draft, and you have that veteran there, a great 1-2 punch leading the way. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Gilmore, and I think the same thing with Campbell, I think it makes sense for both those teams to retain those guys. Now, them hitting free agency, it doesn't mean that they will leave, but at the same time, should they still be out there if the team really wanted to keep them? That's always the thing.
Well, I mean, I think with Campbell too, like he just put out a tweet saying that he loves Baltimore. Like he loves that environment. He loves that area. He loves that team. Now, the one thing that I think hurts him is that Don Martindale's gone from that defense. So if they bring in a new coordinator, which I'm sure they have already, I forget who it is off the top of my head, but that's probably a new base defense, a new structure. It might be a case where Campbell's the odd one out, but we'll see. I think if you love someplace enough like that, you make it work. You redo, because I feel like the Steelers, just to knock on Justin's point just a bit, I feel like the pairing of Campbell and Watt would have been great if Campbell was like 5 years younger. He's a monster. He's a monster, but
that's why I threw in the Chargers. I think he's more willing to go with a win now team like the Chargers are.
Yeah.
I'm projecting to be this year, but I mean, Pittsburgh needed the help. They did not have any run defense, and just as like a scheme fit, they just signed Miles Jack. They have the edge. They have the quarterback. They led the league in sacks, but for some reason, they couldn't stop a run for the life of them.
I don't know.
Makes sense.
And,
well,
okay. And Jurgen, I see on here you have Albert Hainsworth. So make that work.
Oh no, that's easy. He's gonna be a bodyguard for Dan Snyder in Washington, and he's gonna pay him $100 million again.
I was gonna say, okay, that's fine.
Boom, Uno reverse card right there. No, so completing the trio, completing another trio here, because like to your point, I think this is yet another guy who probably should stay on the team he's on, and this team has made overtures letting him know that they want to keep him, Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney, it's been a very up and down career for him in his time in the NFL. He's shown at times to be a great pass rusher early, especially when he was next to J.J. Watt. Production slipped a little bit. There have been seasons where the sack production ain't there. There have been seasons where they are. He's known to be help with the run stuffing a little bit. Jadeveon Clowney, it's hard to really pin down a particular role for him. It really is. But he's still a valuable asset on a defensive line. And he's trying to play his turn as being the mercenary here. He got traded to Seattle, played with Tennessee, played now with Cleveland. He's really going to a bunch of different places, trying to make money. But he also, I think, wants to win, because Tennessee, he goes there, lost in their playoff game in Baltimore. Cleveland goes there, misses the playoffs after they made it. It's been a little tough for Jadeveon, and I think the opportunity to get his money should arise if he stays in Cleveland. I think Cleveland is the place he wants to go to. But, and I'm trying to have a little bit of fun here, we're talking about paid mercenaries. You want to go somewhere where you're going to get some pass rush in. You want to go somewhere where you're playing next to a dominant defensive player like you did early in your career with J.J. Watt and also this past season with Myles Garrett. Why not enjoy the sunshine in beautiful Los Angeles and sign a veteran deal with the LA Rams? Now, again, this would not be a deal for money. This would be a deal just for the sake of being a headhunter and for winning. And this would also be a deal where if he has a good season, he would cash out the following year. Now, like I said, I don't think this is the most realistic because I think this is the offseason he wants to get paid. I think he finally wants to get that big contract, and the Rams cannot be the team to give it to him because they also just gave Allen Robinson money. But if for some reason, because it's weird because he's already declined the long-term deal before, if he wants to go one more time to a team for just 1 year to make a case for himself, why not go to a team that gives you a chance? You were pointing out, Justin, I think, well, people can only listen to us on video, so you point to the ring finger. Just win, baby. A Super Bowl ring on your resume hitting free agency, it heals all wounds. And Jadeveon Clowney is a guy, like I said, he's had some pass rushing before. He's had double-digit sack season. He's been known to help with the run stuffing the last couple of years. You put him on that Rams D-line, who cares what your role is, what role you have for him? Because Aaron Donald's there. Because Leonard Floyd can get a double-digit sack season. Like, there is talent there to be had. Jadeveon Clowney, we all agree, is a physical freak. He can help. And you put him in that defense with the talent that's there. They want to try to go yet on another Super Bowl run. I could see a scenario. Again, it'd have to be a veteran deal, but Clowney to LA for the Rams, try to go for another Super Bowl. Boys, why not? Why not? Not all intents and purposes, he's not going to go there, but, I like to have my fantasies.
I've seen people do crazier things than that.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. It's not bad, I don't think.
Absolutely. But again, and I think the three of us can agree, all the guys that we have here are people that we feel probably should stay with their teams. Maybe Campbell, kind of like you said, if the defense is going to end up changing a lot, maybe he should be the one to find a new home. But Gilmore, I think, should stay in Carolina. And I think if the Browns have made that offer, like if you're Clowney, if you want that money, take the money. Take the money and run from Cleveland, especially because, old buddy is getting a $1 million base salary. get yourself your cash while you can there, because guys are going to have to get cut in future years in Cleveland. Going to the last, our utility crew here. I'm going to start with me just so I don't make the mistake here. I'm going to go with Melvin Gordon. He is my chosen utility piece.
That's who you had. Yes, correct. Yes.
Melvin Gordon. My ideal team here for him is New York, but it's the Buffalo Bills. It is in the state of New York, not the city. Then again, the Jets and Giants play in New Jersey, so there's that. I think Melvin Gordon to Buffalo Bills makes sense. While I think in the second half of the year, people still harping on their running game was a little bit overblown, I think they need another just dynamic guy in the backfield. 5 of the last 6 seasons, Melvin Gordon has had 1,000+ yards from scrimmage in his career. He is a guy who I think we all know is not a number one back, will not be a number one back, but I think for that backfield, doesn't necessarily need to be the number one per se, can just be another fold there to help the run support, which there were times when Josh Allen needed a running back to really have a big game, and he didn't always get that. Like, there were times where he literally had to be a rusher. He was the second leading rusher on that team behind who was supposed to be their main running back. I don't think that's a good thing, especially because that's not what they were supposed to be schemed up as. So I think Melvin Gordon to Buffalo makes a whole ton of sense. I think they got a little bit of cap there, so they could pay him, I think, a decent 1 or 2 year deal. Again, I feel like a lot of guys we're talking about here are going to sign these like short-term deals, get some cash, but really play for winners. And this is a case where I think Melvin Gordon play for a winner, get a little bit of money. Hey, maybe you look really good in that Buffalo offense as well. And I think they need that jolt from a running back. I think Melvin Gordon can be that guy. He can go in between. He can catch a little bit. Again, 1,000 yards from scrimmage total. The receiving has some receiving yards as well. He could still be a weapon. I think it makes sense in Buffalo, who have needed to figure out that running back situation for a couple of years now there in the state of New York, not city. So that is my pick. Moving on from that, I'll get this right this time, I promise. Rick, you have offensive lineman J.C. Treader. Yes? Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, I know, right? So okay. J.C. Treader being let go by Cleveland was a real shock, I think, because he's only missed one game in his career, really, and he's a strong guy. Now, I could have gone with the easy choice here, which a lot of people are looking into Minnesota, which would have been a really nice option for Kirk Cousins. But I'm going to go with a team that's in their division that's a little under the radar here, but a team that desperately, I think, needs a center, and that's Chicago. Chicago doesn't have a true center on their roster. Their depth chart is pretty lacking in that regard. And if you want Justin Fields to stay up in the pocket and give him a veteran option to snap him the ball and lead that offensive line, a line that's got, guys like Cody Whitehair and guys like Dakota Dozier, who they just re-signed, I think it's a good option for him to go to Chicago. My other option was Cincinnati, but with the Bengals making all the moves they did for Lyle Collins and Ted Karras, I think that took them out of the running, although he would have been a great fit there. So I would say Minnesota's going to make the overtures, but Chicago's going to come in the 11th hour and make him the deal that he wants. J.C. Treader's going to the Bears, and I think it's going to really help Justin Fields progress, or it's going to help Trevor Siemian be a good quarterback in the time being. One of those two guys, but I feel like that's where he's going.
That's fair. Chicago needs offensive line help. I feel like they've needed. I feel like every single season, at least a Chicago offensive line position comes up.
Yeah.
In terms of 1 year it's left tackle, 1 year it's their guard. Kyle Long comes back. Oh, I'm not coming back to you though. So it's a whole ordeal of things there when it comes to that. That's not a bad pick at all. Justin, maybe you can add a little bit of insight because you also have a offensive lineman. Dwayne Brown was your choice. The could end up being former left tackle for the Seattle Seahawks, former left tackle for the Houston Texans. This guy has protected some really good quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. Is he going to be protecting another high-tier quarterback, or is he just going to be protecting whatever schlubs that Seattle's going to put there if you have him going back to Seattle? But your best fit for Mr. Dwayne Brown is?
Well, if Seattle's smart, I think they do try to retain him. I know he's a little old. They could probably sign him to a short-term deal. He should be 37 by the start of the season. But instead of going with the obvious ones, let's go to a ready-made line and a ready-made team that's willing to win. And I think that's going to be the Indianapolis Colts. They just traded for a quarterback. They're probably going to lose Eric Fisher, according to Adam Schefter. They're going to need another tackle. And at 37 years old, I bet you he's ready to win now. And the Colts also have the cap space for him. I think that'd be a great fit over there.
That's a amazing selection. Like you forget about it because, losing Costanzo, they need a guy there. They haven't necessarily filled in left tackle at all, like to the level that they would have wished. Eric Fisher was a nice plug and play for a bit, but even we all know like his career, it's been fine, but it's not a guy who was drafted number 1 overall worthy. But that's a great pick as well. And I think you make the good point where he could still get one last pretty good payday here, but play for a team for a while, which, I mean, Andrew Whitworth played recently into his 40s. I think if he's 37 to start this year, let's just assume best case scenario, he could maybe play up to his 39th season. So that's at least 2 years. You get 2 years to develop a left tackle maybe, or even 3 years if he can actually play past the age of 39, which Dwayne Brown, I think for the most part, like if he's played to this point, he's taking care of his body pretty well. Rick, that is a bang up selection there by Justin.
Absolutely is. And it's smart too, because, that prestige and that pomp of going to an area like that where they're just coming off of the season that they had is really big. And you've seen that a lot too. You've seen guys who get cut for some reason, and all of a sudden they look at the teams that are the most competitive or the teams that have won most recently, and they say to themselves, you know what, maybe I'll chance my odds there. A 1 year deal there, team friendly deal there, play there, help them get back again. I think it's a possibility that Dwayne Brown makes that option. I don't know how Seattle's going to feel about it, being that it's within their division, but them's the breaks. You let go of a guy, he wants to go wherever he wants. There you go. Simple as that. Jurgen, you're muted
honestly,
again. You're muted again, Jurgen.
Hey, only twice. It makes sense for all sides. Like I said, Indy, they need a guy, and I think about it. Matt Ryan, when the Falcons made the Super Bowl, it was a strong offensive line that Atlanta had there, especially at center. Alex Mack, who they had just acquired from Cleveland, made all the difference in the world there. I think you pair him up there with the running game, with the offensive line that's already established. That's Dwayne Brown and Quentin Nelson as well. That just feels like two physical freaks of nature on one line. Like, oh my God.
It does.
Oh my God. That's absolutely outstanding.
That's what I was going for.
And beautiful selection. And speaking of outstanding, this was yet another outstanding episode of the Sports Agents of Chaos. Fellas, episode 2, I like to think we did a really good job, but we had everything. We had the analysis, we had the breakdown, we had an amazing review, we had amazing trivia, we had some chaos with our selections and guys we think could go where. We had some chaos with the inner workings of the show that are shown to the people live, because we hide nothing from the people. All of our mistakes laid bare, and because we are the Sports Agents of Chaos. Patent pending. But once again, thank you all for joining us. Justin, Rick, you two were once again beauties. Rick, give your sign off. What do you want the people to know? And are you okay? What are you looking for?
At some point, this podcast turned into an ASMR broadcast for some reason. I don't really know what's going on there. But yeah, no. I mean, I'll be seeing all y'all next week. More chaos, more fun, more monochromatic tones in my my outfit choices, and maybe I'll wear a nice shirt next week, Justin. But who knows? We'll see. But we never know.
I'm looking for the grapefruits, Rick.
Oh, okay.
Justin, you get final say. Send the beautiful people home happy.
Thanks for tuning in. I always have a great time doing this. I love to talk football. Love to talk with you gentlemen over there. Can't wait to do it again next week.
Everybody, thank you for joining us, and we will see you all next time.